I got fired for refusing to work unpaid weekends. My boss said I lacked a growth mindset, as if loyalty means sacrificing every bit of my personal life for his bottom line. Funny thing is, that so-called lack of commitment became the best thing that ever happened to me. Fast forward a couple of years, and here I am, CEO of a startup that's actually thriving. Guess who's now knocking on my door looking for investment? Yep, the same guy who thought I wasn't ambitious enough. I invited him out for coffee, but when he showed up expecting an easy deal, I smiled and said no. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about owning your worth and rewriting the rules of success on your own terms. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name's Avery Morgan, I'm 34 and I live in Denver, a city that's equal parts ambitious and laid back, which is exactly how I try to live my life. Before all this, I was just another mid-level manager grinding away at a marketing firm called Crestview Solutions. My boss, Greg, a guy in his early 50s with a work hard, no excuses mantra, had a habit of pushing us to the brink, especially on weekends. I wasn't some clock watcher, I worked hard, stayed late when needed, but when it came to unpaid weekends, I drew the line. Family mattered. Mental health mattered, work wasn't everything. Standing my ground didn't make me popular, but it kept me sane. Little did I know, that decision would change the entire trajectory of my life, turning what felt like a setback into the best thing that ever happened to me. It all came to a head one Friday afternoon. Greg called a team meeting, again just as everyone was packing up to leave. Weekend work, he announced, is non-negotiable. If you want to grow here, you show commitment. The room went quiet. I looked around and saw tired eyes, but no one spoke up. When he turned to me, I said calmly, I'm happy to give my all Monday through Friday, but weekends are my time. Unpaid work on my personal time isn't growth, it's exploitation. Greg didn't hide his frustration. That's a lack of growth mindset, he snapped. 2 days later, I was handed my termination letter. The official reason. Failure to align with company culture. It stung, but deep down, I knew I wasn't the one who'd lost something. That moment, painful as it was, became the spark that ignited everything that came next. Losing my job felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I remember sitting on my couch that Sunday, staring at the termination letter, thinking, well, Avery, congratulations. You just got fired for having boundaries. My phone buzzed, it was Maya, my best friend and the unofficial therapist of our group. Hey, Avery, she said with that mix of sympathy and sarcasm she perfected over the years. So Greg finally kicked you to the curb for being a weekend rebel, huh? I chuckled despite myself. Yeah, apparently refusing to work unpaid Saturdays means I'm dead weight. Who knows? Honestly, Maya continued, I always thought Greg's idea of growth mindset was just a fancy way of saying work yourself into an early grave. You dodged a bullet. That made me laugh harder. Maya had a point. Greg's version of growth was grinding until your eyes bled, with zero regard for life outside the office. Meanwhile, I had dreams, real ones, that didn't involve endless Zoom calls or eating cold takeout at midnight. But reality hit hard. Rent was due, bills piled up, and my LinkedIn inbox was suddenly filled with thanks but no thanks. The job market was brutal, and my principled stand felt like a scarlet letter. One evening, as I brewed my third cup of instant coffee, my old college roommate, Jason, popped by. Jason was the kind of guy who could sell sand in the desert but had zero tolerance for corporate nonsense. Avery, I hate to say it, but Greg's a dinosaur. You're a firecracker, he said, slapping me on the back. You should start something of your own, prove those stuffy suits wrong. I sighed, easy for you to say. Where do I even start? Jason grinned. You've got the brains, the grit, and a killer eye for marketing. I'll help with the tech side. Let's build something that doesn't suck the soul out of people. His enthusiasm was infectious. Suddenly, the idea that had been simmering quietly inside me, a marketing consultancy that respected people's time and intelligence, felt possible. Over the next few weeks, with Jason's support and Maya's endless pep talks, I started sketching a business plan on the backs of napkins and random scraps of paper. The irony wasn't lost on me. Getting fired for not growing pushed me toward real growth, the kind that didn't come with burnout as the price tag. And just like that, the very thing Greg warned me about, stepping away from his growth mindset, became my launchpad. Little did I know, the universe had a twist waiting just around the corner, and it involved Greg himself knocking on my door in the most unexpected way. Starting my own business was like jumping off a cliff and hoping to grow wings on the way down. In theory, it sounded empowering and exciting. In reality, it was a roller coaster of exhaustion, rejection, and more coffee than I care to admit. But I wasn't about to let Greg's dismissal be the end of my story. Jason and I set up shop in my cramped apartment. Okay, maybe cramped is putting it kindly. The office was basically my dining table squeezed between a stack of unopened mail and a plant I somehow managed to kill. But it was ours. We called the business ClearPath Marketing, a nod to how I wanted to cut through the noise with honest, straightforward strategies that didn't require sacrificing weekends or sanity. Our first hurdle, capital. Jason looked at our savings account and said, "Avery, this is less money than a celebrity pays for a haircut." We laughed, but the reality was biting. Without investors or a fancy office, we had to bootstrap everything ourselves. I maxed out my credit card buying software licenses. Jason scavenged for second-hand tech gear. One day, I found myself pitching to a local business owner, Mrs. Ramirez, who ran a boutique coffee shop called Been There, Done That. She was sharp, no-nonsense, and skeptical about what two scrappy newcomers could do. "So, let me get this straight," she said, stirring her espresso with a delicate sigh. "You're promising to boost my brand without me having to sell my soul or work every waking hour." "That's exactly it," I said, trying to keep my smile from trembling. "We believe in smart, targeted marketing, not burning out your staff or your customers." Mrs. Ramirez leaned back, eyeing me like I was either a breath of fresh air or just another dreamer with big words. "All right then, show me you mean it. Impress me, or I'm sticking with my nephew's digital guru." That first win felt like we'd climbed Everest. But then came the rejections, the thanks, but no thanks, emails piling up faster than dirty dishes. Friends and family started asking if I was serious or just having a midlife crisis, and some days I wondered if they weren't right. Maya checked in often, her pep talks mixed with sarcasm. "Remember, Avery, Greg thought working unpaid weekends was the key to success. Meanwhile, you're out here building something real on your own terms," she said one night, sipping wine over a video call. "Plus, you get to pick your own hours. Unlike that guy who probably schedules grind time during dinner." I laughed, but even with support, the pressure was relentless. Every day was a test of will, balancing client needs, bookkeeping, which I hated, and the constant fear that one mistake could tank us. Jason was my rock, but even he had moments of doubt. "Look, I'm all for this dream, Avery," he said during one particularly late night fueled by cheap pizza and caffeine. "But if we don't land a big client soon, we might have to eat ramen for the next year." I shot him a mock glare. Great. I always wanted to feel like I'm living in a startup-themed anime. But despite the setbacks, a breakthrough came. We landed a regional tech company for a pilot marketing campaign, a major step up from local coffee shops. This was our chance to prove that working smart and respecting boundaries wasn't just idealistic nonsense. Midway through the project, I remember Jason saying, "Avery, this is it. If we pull this off, we're no longer the scrappy underdogs." And we did. The campaign hit its targets, the client was thrilled, and word started spreading. I wasn't just the woman who refused to work weekends anymore, I was the CEO of a company people wanted to work with. But just when things started looking up, the shadows of my past crept back in. Greg's name popped up more than once in investor meetings and industry chatter. Turns out, his own company was hitting rough waters. The same man who'd fired me was now scrambling for investors to save his sinking ship. I caught wind of this through a casual message from Maya. "Guess who's looking for a coffee chat?" she teased. I sighed, half amused, half annoyed. Greg wanted to talk, and not just about old times. This was the crossroads. Could I forget the past, or was this my moment to redefine the rules of growth mindset once and for all? Midway through our journey with ClearPath Marketing, something shifted, not just in the business, but in me. I remember sitting in that cluttered makeshift office one evening, the glow of my laptop lighting up my tired face, Jason beside me poring over data reports. The first few months had been a wild mess of highs and lows, client meetings that made me feel alive, and days when I questioned every choice I'd made. But now we were starting to see something real. Growth. Actual measurable growth that wasn't built on burnout or endless grind culture mantras. That feeling hit me especially hard during a client update call with Horizon Tech, the regional tech company that had taken a chance on us. Their marketing director, Chloe, was the epitome of cool professionalism. She wasn't just pleased with the results, she was impressed. "Avery," Chloe said, "your team's approach is refreshing. The campaign's engagement metrics are exceeding our expectations, and I love that you've managed to keep your team balanced while delivering such results. That's rare." Her words felt like validation, not just for the business but for me personally. I had always believed that success didn't need to come at the expense of personal life, but proving it in a world that worships hustle was harder than I'd imagined. Jason nudged me after the call, a grin spreading across his face. "See, you don't need to work weekends to win, who knew?" I laughed, but beneath the humor was a deep sense of accomplishment. The startup was no longer a dream scribbled on napkins, it was real, thriving, and growing on its own terms. But success brought new challenges, and no shortage of skepticism. Some investors, especially those tied to Greg's old network, were hesitant. They whispered about my lack of traditional hustle, equating long hours with dedication, and questioning if a company that valued work-life balance could scale fast enough. One afternoon, I found myself in a meeting with a group of potential investors, including Martin, an old-school type who wasn't shy about voicing his doubts. "So, Avery," Martin began, leaning forward, "your model is unconventional. How do you ensure commitment without that all-in mentality? In this business, if you're not burning the midnight oil, you're falling behind." I met his gaze steadily. "Martin, commitment isn't about how late you stay at the office. It's about delivering results, innovating smartly, and respecting the people who make it happen. Burnout isn't a badge of honor, it's a warning sign." He raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Sounds idealistic." "Maybe," I replied with a calm smile, "but it's working. We've tripled engagement for Horizon Tech without forcing anyone to sacrifice their weekends. Our team's productivity and morale are higher than ever." I'd argue that's smarter growth. Martin's skepticism lingered, but I could tell the conversation planted a seed of doubt in the old grind is king mentality. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Greg's company was struggling. I heard whispers of missed deadlines, overworked employees, and investors losing patience. The same growth mindset he preached seemed to have become a leash, choking rather than driving his business forward. One day, Maya texted me with a grin. "You know Greg's trying to get funding from some of the folks I know. Think he's desperate enough to talk to you." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smirking. The irony was delicious. That moment marked a turning point. I realized that success wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about carving a path that felt authentic, sustainable, and empowering. The startup wasn't just a business, it was my statement. And yet, with Greg's name creeping back into my world, I knew the past wasn't done with me. The coming weeks would test everything I'd built, my resolve, my principles, and the very definition of what it means to have a growth mindset. The story wasn't over. In fact, it was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Just as I was beginning to settle into a rhythm with ClearPath marketing, the real test came. Success was no longer a distant dream. It was our current reality, but with it came a new set of challenges that made the early days look like a walk in the park. After landing Horizon Tech as our marquee client, our inboxes were suddenly flooded. Smaller businesses, intrigued by our approach, started reaching out. It was thrilling and terrifying. I found myself juggling client expectations, managing a growing team remotely, and trying to keep the company's culture intact. All while battling the gnawing pressure to scale quickly and prove that my version of growth mindset was more than just a lucky experiment. One particular morning sticks in my memory. I was on a call with Marcus, a potential investor who was a good fit on paper but had the energy of a hawk circling its prey. "Avery," Marcus said sharply, "I like what you're doing, but growth takes sacrifice. You've got to put in the hours, no exceptions, no weekends off if you want to make it big. Are you prepared for that?" I paused, feeling the familiar itch of frustration rise. "Marcus, I'm all for dedication, but I don't believe burnout is a path to success. Our model proves you can deliver excellent results without sacrificing personal boundaries. We value sustainability over exhaustion." He scoffed lightly. "That sounds nice for a small outfit. But when the stakes get real, those ideals get thrown out the window." I swallowed my impatience. Then maybe it's time to rethink what real means. Hanging up, I took a deep breath. That conversation summed up a lot of what I was up against. Investors like Marcus saw my approach as naive or risky. But what they didn't see was the dedicated team behind ClearPath who believed in working smart, not just hard. Who thrived because they weren't drained into oblivion every weekend. Adding to the pressure, our finances weren't exactly a smooth ride. Scaling costs started to climb, hiring new team members, marketing, software subscriptions, all while cash flow remained tight. Jason often joked, "We're basically one big risk and a half." One evening, after a long day of client calls and managing a late-night crisis with a server outage, Jason collapsed into his chair. "Avery, if we don't get a big win soon, we're gonna have to make some tough calls. Layoffs, cuts, I hate thinking about it." I hated it too, but startups aren't fairy tales. They're a series of tough choices, and every decision felt like walking a tightrope. Meanwhile, Greg's name kept cropping up in industry chatter. Rumors swirled about his company missing deadlines and losing key clients due to overworked and disengaged staff. The same boss who once called me lazy for refusing unpaid weekends now seemed to be drowning in the consequences of his own grind culture. One day, Maya messaged me, her tone dripping with irony. "So Greg's in trouble." Big surprise. I smiled despite myself. The tables were turning, but I reminded myself this wasn't about gloating. It was about proving that success without sacrifice wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Amid the chaos, a breakthrough came. A respected angel investor named Olivia reached out after hearing about our Horizon Tech success. "Avery," she said during our first video call, "I appreciate your commitment to a balanced culture. It's refreshing in this industry, but let me be honest, do you think your model can scale nationally? Because investors want growth that's fast and aggressive." I didn't flinch. "Olivia, we believe in steady, sustainable growth. Scaling fast without risking burnout or turnover is challenging but vital. We want a model where the team thrives as the company grows." She paused, considering, "That's bold and rare. Let's explore it." That call rekindled hope, but it also reminded me that every victory came with fresh hurdles. As ClearPath grew, I felt myself stretching thinner than ever, constantly negotiating between my ideals and the practical demands of a fast-moving startup world. My growth mindset was tested daily, and not always in ways I expected. Then came the message that made my heart skip. Greg wanted to meet. He was reaching out, trying to get coffee with me, not just for a casual catch-up, but with hopes of pitching an investment opportunity involving his own struggling company. Part of me wanted to ignore it to block the reminder of where I'd come from. But I was curious. More than that, I saw it as a chance to show what real growth looks like, not the hollow hustle culture he championed, but the smart, human-centered leadership that ClearPath was building. Still, the stakes were high. This meeting wasn't just about coffee or investment talks, it was a confrontation with everything I'd fought to build and prove. The next step was clear. I had to face Greg, and do it on my own terms. A few days after receiving Greg's message, I found myself staring at my phone, the screen glowing with his simple invitation. "Coffee, I'd like to discuss a potential investment opportunity." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same man who had fired me for refusing unpaid weekend work was now asking for help. But more than irony, there was a strange twist of fate at play, one that felt almost cinematic. I debated what to do. Part of me wanted to ghost him, to avoid dredging up old wounds or rehashing past frustrations. But I realized this was bigger than Greg. This was about showing what true growth looks like and owning my journey. So I agreed with a carefully measured tone. "Sure, let's meet." The coffee shop was a quiet, upscale spot downtown, the kind of place where decisions are made over lattes and the hum of hushed conversations. I arrived early, nerves tingling with a mix of anticipation and resolve. When Greg walked in, I barely recognized him. The confident, demanding boss from my past looked tired, worn down by the pressures he once imposed on others. We exchanged the usual polite greetings before Greg got down to business. "Avery," he began, "I'll be honest. Things haven't been going well. We're facing serious challenges, and I'm looking for investors who can help turn this around. I thought of you because of your success with ClearPath." I studied him, measuring my words carefully. "Greg, I appreciate the recognition, but I'm curious, how does your idea of growth mindset look now?" He sighed, a hint of humility in his voice. I realize now that pushing people to the brink wasn't sustainable. I should have listened more, valued balance instead of just hours logged. "I want to do things differently, but I need support." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken history. Then I smiled, not out of malice, but confidence and clarity. "I'm glad you've come to that realization. But the truth is, Greg, I've built ClearPath on a different foundation, one that respects people and their boundaries. I can't invest in a company that doesn't share those values. His expression shifted, surprise mixed with respect. So you're declining. Yes, I said firmly, I'm declining the investment. And I'm declining the idea that success requires sacrificing everything else. Greg nodded slowly, a moment of genuine reflection passing between us. You've grown, Avery. More than I thought possible. And so have you, Greg, I hope, I replied. This isn't about winning or losing, it's about knowing what you stand for and leading with that. We parted ways with a handshake that felt like closure, not bitter, but earned. Walking away, I felt a wave of relief and pride. That coffee meeting wasn't just about business, it was a symbol of how far I'd come. I had taken what once felt like a setback and turned it into a triumph, not by chasing someone else's definition of success, but by creating my own. This twist of fate wasn't about revenge. It was about empowerment. About showing that growth mindset isn't about blind sacrifice, but about thoughtful, sustainable progress, the kind that builds not just companies but lives worth living. And as I stepped back into the bustling streets of Denver, I knew the story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a message for anyone who's ever been told they're not enough for standing up for themselves, that real growth starts when you say, no more, and build your own path forward. The day Greg asked to meet wasn't just a random invitation, it was a crossroads. When his message popped up on my phone, a rush of conflicting emotions hit me all at once. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend the past never happened, and keep building ClearPath without looking back. But another part, the part that believed in growth, real growth, knew this moment was bigger than just one coffee meeting. Because this wasn't just Greg asking for money. It was him reaching out to the woman he once dismissed as not having a growth mindset. The very woman who refused to bend to his grind culture. The same woman who'd walked away and built something better. Suddenly, the stakes felt higher than ever. I spent the night before the meeting replaying every conversation we'd had, every sneer about unpaid weekends, every subtle jab about my lack of commitment. But I also reminded myself of the countless late nights Jason and I had endured, the risks we took, and the strength I found in standing up for my values. As I sat in the coffee shop waiting, the minutes stretched. My heart beat faster than I wanted to admit. When Greg finally arrived, the confident man I remembered was replaced by someone more cautious, quieter, even a little humbled. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Avery, I'm in trouble, he said plainly. Our company's struggling and I need investors, people who understand what it takes to turn this around. I looked at him, measuring every word I was about to say. Greg, I'm glad you reached out, but things aren't the same as when I worked for you. The growth mindset you preached was one that demanded endless sacrifice. That mindset burned people out. He nodded slowly, his gaze sincere. I see that now. I was wrong. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about recognizing what real leadership and growth meant. I had built ClearPath on respect, for work, for life, for balance. And I couldn't compromise that for a quick fix. I appreciate your honesty, I said softly, but I'm here because I want to build something sustainable. I can't invest in a culture that doesn't value the people who make it work. Greg's shoulders relaxed slightly. So you're saying no? I smiled, calm and clear. Yes, Greg, I'm saying no. The crisis wasn't just his company's financial struggles or my tough decision. It was the moment I reclaimed my power, not by burning bridges or holding grudges, but by standing firm in who I am. That meeting closed a chapter I hadn't realized was still open. Walking away, I felt lighter, ready to lead ClearPath into the future I'd always envisioned, one where growth didn't cost me my soul. Walking away from that coffee meeting with Greg wasn't just about declining an investment opportunity, it was a defining moment in my journey. The moment I said no, I reclaimed the narrative of what success and growth meant for me. It wasn't about proving him wrong or holding on to grudges. It was about standing firm in the values I had fought so hard to build ClearPath on: respect, balance, and sustainable progress. Over the following weeks, that sense of clarity settled deep within me. I realized that my story wasn't simply about escaping a toxic work culture. It was about creating something new, something better. ClearPath wasn't just a startup, it was a statement. A statement that a company could thrive without demanding every ounce of your time and energy. That success didn't have to come with burnout as the price. The culture we fostered became our greatest asset. Our team was motivated not by fear or exhaustion but by trust and empowerment. People worked smarter, collaborated openly, and genuinely enjoyed what they did. Our clients noticed the difference too. Many told me how refreshing it was to work with a company that valued people as much as performance. Looking back, I understand now that Greg's accusations about my lack of growth mindset were never really about me. They were about his inability to see that growth could mean something different than what he'd been taught or was comfortable with. He was stuck in a paradigm that equated long hours and sacrifice with success. I'm proud to say that ClearPath is growing steadily, on our own terms. We're expanding our client base, innovating creatively, and building a reputation for integrity and balance. More importantly, I'm leading a company that respects its people and encourages them to live full lives outside the office. This journey taught me that real growth isn't about relentless hustle or blind sacrifice. It's about building with intention, respecting boundaries, and valuing the human behind the work. Saying no to Greg wasn't just a refusal, it was a powerful yes to myself and to a new way of leading. And as I look toward the future, I know this isn't just my story anymore. It's a message for anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough for standing up for themselves. Real growth starts when you define success on your own terms and have the courage to walk your path unapologetically. As I walked away from that coffee shop that day, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just about turning down an investment, it was about closing a chapter that had held me back and stepping fully into the future I was building. The past no longer held power over me, I was in control of my story. Looking back, I realize how much I'd grown, not just as a CEO, but as a person. Standing firm on my boundaries, refusing to accept a toxic definition of growth mindset, and choosing balance over burnout didn't make me weak. It made me stronger. It made me a leader who understands that success isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet or endless hours logged. It's about respect, sustainability, and real human connection. ClearPath isn't just a business anymore, it's a reflection of everything I believe in. It's proof that you can build something meaningful without sacrificing yourself in the process. Our team thrives because we honor each other's time and talents. Our clients come to us because they trust that we'll deliver results without demands that destroy lives. And for anyone out there who's been told they lack growth mindset because they set limits or prioritize themselves, know this: growth isn't a one-size-fits-all. It's personal, nuanced, and above all about owning your worth. The kind of growth that lasts is the kind you choose for yourself. My journey wasn't just about proving Greg wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could redefine success on my own terms, and that sometimes the biggest growth comes from standing your ground and saying enough. So if you're watching this and feeling stuck, remember, your value isn't measured by how much you sacrifice. True growth is about thriving in work, in life, and on your own terms, and that's a mindset worth embracing.